Hello and welcome back to the Commandonuts devlog, a top-down shooter that I'm currently developing in Unity. And in this episode, we're going to be working on making the infinite void of a survival mode seem a little less void-like by adding a scrolling world, some random tiling, and a few props and decorations scattered around the place. In a survival endless mode, the map is probably the least important part, as the focus is more on the enemies, the weapons, and the survival. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't put any focus on it. So instead, I'm going to bash my head into a wall repeatedly to make an infinitely scrolling tile system. One approach I could have taken would have been to draw a large map, and when you reach one edge, you simply warp to the other side. But this isn't the approach that I went for in the end, as this would require me to draw each map variant, and it didn't sound like it was painful enough to do. So instead, I'm going to go for a tiled approach. The basic idea is that every time you walk into a new tile, the tiles behind you move in front, creating a looping effect. So here's a diagram of what's going on with a 3x3 grid of tiles numbered 0 to 8. And by using some little maths tricks, I can use these to figure out which way the player has gone and then grab the opposite tiles to move. I can go into details of this in another video, but it's just far too technical for today. I actually wrote and recorded a whole section of this, but my brain melted just listening to it. So I've done you a favour. This process was very painful and it took me quite a few attempts to get right, as there's a lot of weird edge cases when working with something like this, as I'm constrained by both the laws of mathematics and the way C# handles them, but after many attempts I got it working. And here we go. I believe I fixed all the bugs. I've been playing around with it for a while now and I haven't experienced any new issues, so I'm going to say that this is a success for now. But the next step, obviously, is to add some lovely visuals to the tiles, starting with the factory level. Currently, each tile contains 2 tile maps just like the one on the main maps, for the floor and walls. As I already have some basic sprites from there, I drew out the layout using the walls and added a tile map and composite collider. As the world is repeating, I have to consider what the layout would be like in any order, and have to make sure the edges connect nicely so you can't tell where the edge of a tile lies. And after a quick play around with the tiles, this is the layout I came up with. It contains a room, some pillars, and small features to break up the open space and a locked area in the middle. And as you can see, no matter where the player is, the tiles positions are always the same relative to each other. For a first map with no props yet, this looks great. Most of the code I've written up to this point is pretty good, but one thing that is needed is to extend these classes to have a survival focused mode, starting with the spawner. So what I've done is create 2 subclasses for the spawner, Standard and Survival. Standard just has the code originally found in the spawner class, and Survival mode now has a few new features. The first thing is that it stores the survival drop table, which works slightly different in survival mode. The only items that will drop are weapons and gear directly usable by the player, with ammo and resources not being necessary. The next new feature is the addition of spawn waves and wave elements. The original spawner was only able to spawn a single type of enemy, but with these new extensions, the survival spawner will have a list of waves that will cycle through. Each wave consists of a list of elements that store a unit type and its weighting, so that its spawning can be a lot more varied. For example, I could have a wave that is 90% basic strawberries, 10% giant strawberries, and the spawner will be able to randomly spawn these around the player, making the gameplay even more varied. As it stores a list of waves, it will iterate through it at regular intervals, say every 2 minutes for example, which will hopefully give the player more of a challenge, as one wave may be a horde wave, and the next one may be a smaller amount of tankier enemies. The wave spawning could also be randomized so that it's not the same enemies in a specific order, so you don't know what's coming next. The inventory system is another one that has been adapted for the survival mode, as the weapon system will be different, like I mentioned earlier. The player will only be able to carry one weapon at a time, and as soon as a new one is collected, the old one is lost. Weapons will still have to reload, but will have infinite ammo to just focus on the survival aspect of the game. At the beginning of every run, the player will be level 1 and will gain experience as normal. The enemies and drops will match this level, forcing the player to periodically switch to a new weapon on the floor. By making the player switch, it'll hopefully add a layer of challenge, as they might not get the ideal weapon for a scenario and be forced to adapt their playstyle. The last thing we're going to look at adapting today is the experience system. As it's a one life mode, every run will start with a level 1 character, and while XP is gained the same way, the drops will be slightly different. Instead of having an area level, which dictates what levels the enemies spawn as, all the enemies will match the player's level, so the spawner needs to know every time the player levels up. As the player triggers an event when they level up, the spawner simply needs to listen to this event and match the level. And with these additions, the survival mode is really coming together and getting closer to being feature complete. The last major job that needs to be done is to add the new enemy types. I've already started planning some enemies, like this pumpkin here, but I'm aiming for about 10 different enemies, each with a couple of variants. But that's for next time. For now though, thank you very much for watching. If you want to listen to me rant about numbers for 10 minutes, let me know, I'll release that as a separate video. Leave a like on this video, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.